Xbox sales are abysmally low. This is not the first time we talked about this thing.
Probably won't be the last either, Scott.
Might not be the last, and we not to harp on about it, but there is a new report from US data tracking firm Circana reporting that Xbox Series console sales are now tracking behind the Xbox One if you go off a comparative time frame. Series console sales are reportedly down globally 19%, shifting only 32 million units versus the 57.9 million of the Xbox One. And the PlayStation 5 is still selling strong and is ahead of PlayStation 4 by 7% across the last 52 months. Comparatively. And it is also worth throwing in here that hardware sales are down across the board, falling by 25% across all of February, this year. So there's a couple of things here to talk about in terms of like the general attitude of people towards gaming. Like a quarter of most people, or a quarter of the potential audience, isn't getting as invested as they used to. But also the Xbox side of things, considering just how much everybody pointed and laughed at the Xbox One, it was still received more warmly overall across the generation than the Series consoles.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, it's maybe surprising when you see how much it is behind the Xbox One. But I think while the Xbox One had, obviously, that dodgy start, the very bad start, it still had momentum coming in off the 360. Its core franchises were hotter then than they are now. Gears, Halo, there was a bit more momentum around those titles. You obviously had Phil Spencer coming in and just making excellent plays, announcing backwards compatibility, really righting the ship and getting the goodwill behind the Xbox One. It had, again, for the time, quite big exclusives like Rise of the Tomb Raider and obviously Halo 5, which turned out to be bad, but it was when we still had, we thought 343 Industries were going to be good.
It wasn't as on fire as Infinite either.
Exactly.
There was no Craig meme.
It was before we knew. I do think it's weird in the modern era of Xbox to see it that far behind just because the Series S is so affordable. I thought that might have provided something of a counter to the more expensive PlayStation 5 or even Xbox Series X if you were going to, if you wanted to taste of next-gen gaming but you didn't have the money to go all in on one of the higher-end machines. So the fact that experiment hasn't worked, I think, is maybe the most interesting part of all of this for me personally.
I was going to say like that because I ended up getting an Xbox One X because I was like, well, I want the most powerful version of whatever's available. But just having a quick Google, that didn't come in until 2016. So it is way later. They did launch with just the standard Xbox One for a good long while. Like obviously across the 8th gen, various companies were exploring the high end stuff, the PlayStation 4 Pro or whatever, but leading with double SKUs from the beginning, like you said, didn't seem to work out. And the Series S, I think, is more popular than the X anyway when it comes to their particular sales, which in itself is fascinating. When people think about Xbox, they think about Series X, but more people have a Series S, and then that is like a harder console to support anyway. But just a weird reality.
Well, I think also this is also the case for PlayStation and Sony. The meme around the PS5 is the PlayStation 5 has no games. That obviously hasn't really stopped the console itself selling, but you look at Xbox with all of their studios, and you could kind of say the same thing for them when it comes to must-play exclusives. Like, just generally, if you're someone on the fence buying into a next-gen machine, what are you buying it for in the current climate? Right. You might get a PS5 to play something like Spider-Man 2, which is incredibly popular.
God of War.
Or God of War. That's cross-gen release, but still, you might want to get the best version of it. Whereas on the Xbox side of things, I think they've had a lot of good games. I've said to you so many times that I've played my Xbox Series X way more than I ever did my Xbox One, but just when they started to have exclusives and started to release them frequently, that's when they announced that, hey, all of this is probably going to come to PlayStation anyway. So again, it stops giving people that reason to want to get an Xbox because of those exclusives, and I think that's probably factored in a major way as well. Because I mean, I mention this all the time as well. Ewan's always on the podcast, and I remember when he was thinking about getting an Xbox because he wanted to play stuff like Indiana Jones, and then as soon as that was announced to be coming to PlayStation, he was just like, well, I'll just wait until it comes to the machine that I currently have.
I couldn't believe when they revealed Indiana Jones that the PS5 release date was part of that reveal. Like, or one of the parts of the updated trailer anyway. Just a weird, it's not like a 1-2 punch. It's like a weird feint. It's sort of like, we've hit it. It looks really good. Looks really strong. But you don't need to get this. Like, you might as well wait. And I know that their overall thing is just get you into the Xbox ecosystem. You can play those games wherever you want. But it does seem like it's having a massive impact on their console sales, which maybe they would argue is the point. As long as their subscription numbers go up And I'm still yet to meet a single human on Earth who plays Game Pass through their phone. But they must be out there. And then obviously you can have Game Pass on PC or whatever it is. But it's worth throwing in that Game Pass is having and is about to continue having a phenomenal year. Like, you have Doom Eternal coming up. Like I said, Indiana Jones at the end of last year is great. Atomfall that's coming out is just on Game Pass. The Tony Hawk's remasters are going to be on there. Like, if you've been waiting for the whole bang for your buck side of it, even though we would argue it's been there all along, the big attention-grabbing, head-turning stuff, that's all dropping in the next few months. Like, you just would immediately save so much money. Even Ubisoft Plus is only on Xbox.
Yes, exactly.
Which is like a side thing, but I just used that to save myself £55 on Assassin's Creed Shadows.
And look, you don't make money on consoles. Like, you of course you make some money, but console makers don't get into the business to make their fortune by selling the hardware. It's by selling the software ultimately. Of course you'll make some money. I'm sure they're not sat there thinking, this is great that hardware sales are down. But for them, I mean, they've come out and said it's not the be all and end all for them as a company, because they are focusing on those other revenue streams. They're focusing on Game Pass, and I think they would prefer to maybe sell fewer consoles, but have a bigger majority of the people who do buy those consoles on a Game Pass and subscribing regularly, and have that attach rate extremely high, because now that they've moved the likes of Doom or what have you to PlayStation, they're going to get money on the software sales there. They're going to broaden the audience more immediately than they would have if they tried to double down and get the Xbox out to more people, which, as we've seen over the past few years, just isn't working for them. It's not a tactic that has borne fruit.
Phil Spencer's whole thing was that it's a generational change. He was like, when you look at all the user data and all the consumer data, most younger gamers don't understand why they can't just pick up a phone and play stuff. And again, like I said, I'm yet to meet anybody that's the case. Like, I have younger relatives. I'm yet to see them go, have you seen my Xbox? It's a Samsung. I haven't yet to see that happen in real life, but I get the convenience side of it. Like, I like picking up like a attachable controller, sliding my phone into it and picking up where I left off from the big screen. I get the appeal to a degree. I just don't see people doing that as their main way to game. I think if you care about the medium in any serious capacity, you're sitting down in front of a TV and spending the time that way. To a degree. Like, I think if you're going to take something in cinematically, I don't know, I think at some point you end up getting the proper setup. But like I said, his overall push is a generational one. And so whether they're ahead of the curve or not, that's what's interesting to see, because they would argue, assumedly, that all of this stuff is in the direction they want to go anyway.
Yeah.
Like, they don't care about the console sales because people are picking up phones, tablets, using remote play on a laptop screen or whatever.
It has to be. It's too risky in the current climate to make games for the budgets that they are made for today, upwards of $200 million, and then hope you recoup those costs by making those games exclusive and selling them to a relatively small install base. Like, I can see them looking at those numbers and saying, well, yeah, this just doesn't make sense if we're spending $200 million on the next Halo, but we've only sold 40 million copies and we're capped at 40 million Xboxes, sorry. So we're capped at that upper ceiling of, a potential audience. In the modern climate, I just don't think that makes sense. You want to be on as many platforms as possible, unless you have the market share that a Sony or a Nintendo has, where it doesn't really matter.
Which they obviously don't have.
Exactly, yeah. They don't have that at all, so why not spread out to PC and every console that you can get to try and recoup some of that money and to offset some of the risk that comes with that cost. And if it attracts people to the hardware and attracts people to Game Pass, that's a bonus. But as long as we sell copies and make sure we're not just wasting all of this money on these inflated budgets, I think that will maybe be their priority right now in the short term.
Yeah, my whole thing is, like, think about Xbox history. Like, when they came along and it was a huge deal that they had a hard drive, it was like, what the hell are you guys doing? No one wants that. And then it became the standard thing. And then Xbox Live, and then achievements, and indies like that, and mandated demos for everything that was on the online store. But like I said, the overall indie push became the entire indie sphere of gaming, like, overall. Getting that stuff available to consoles. Obviously, it was on Steam, but the console market is a whole thing. And it's like, this is the next one of those, where in retrospect, we need to give it another 10 years to look back and be like, oh, it started there. Because in the last couple of weeks, Sony have updated the PlayStation Portal to have a bigger library and make the idea of a portable PlayStation a new thing again, as in something they're putting more time into. So there's a whole thing with Xbox pursuing specifically portables as well. They want to have that. Is it Nvidia crossover? Or, I think it's Nvidia. One of the third-party manufacturers is making a dedicated Xbox shell. So I'm just curious, like that idea of gaming's foundation shifting again. It seems like this is the thing. I'm just not convinced yet, but maybe.
You know what? If you think back to the Xbox One and that announcement, a lot of stuff definitely hasn't aged well, but some of it has. They were taking a risk on a digital future that has, by and large, pretty much come true. It might not be 100% adaptation of digital games, but it's pretty close. It's the majority of game sales do come digitally now. So they were on the right track in a way with those ideas. Obviously, off the track completely with the DRM and the all-in-one entertainment system.
Yes.
But, some of that did come true. And I think this is definitely a more measured approach. And I just think it makes sense for them. And, I genuinely believe, and it sounds maybe backhanded, it might sound derogatory, I think they're better doing something else. Like, at a certain point, it just becomes dumb to go toe-to-toe with PlayStation on the same model that we've had for the past 20 years and constantly lose when you can provide something different for the industry and for the gamer and entice them that way. Like, I don't regret buying my Xbox Series X.
No.
I play it all the time because of Game Pass, because of the unique things that Xbox has to offer. I still play my PlayStation a lot, but I still think there's enough reason there and probably more reason to go on my Xbox now than during the Xbox One era when it was just, okay, we've got some exclusives. A lot of them were just easy to go, I can wait. I might not even have to play that. Gears 4, am I missing that much? Halo 5,
I would say no.
Am I missing that much? Dead Rising 3, am I missing that much? You know what I mean? Like, there's stuff there that I would be interested in, but not enough for me to shell out, whereas Game Pass, that's a good deal.
Yeah, and also back then they were losing to just Sony rediscovering their first party and all that kind of stuff. The thing that's really ironic with all of this is that if you go off Starfield's release window, that did boost console sales, and it was that whole thing of Phil Spencer going, games don't sell consoles, it needs to be this wider service push, and then Starfield boosted their hardware. With the amount of games that are coming out, whether it's Call of Duty or Doom or whatever it is, I assume there'll be a console surge to a degree. It won't be that much to overturn anything, but I still think the roots of the industry are still in good games and putting them on consoles and whatever it is. But it's going to be interesting seeing the rest of this generation play out with the rest of the Switch 2 and then whatever Sony does for the next few years.